The announcement from the Galactic Council came with brutal finality. Across Earth's many continents, screens flickered on with the cold, distant faces of alien representatives, their expressions indifferent. The words they spoke were unmistakable. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Federation. Your actions, deemed destabilizing and hostile, can no longer be tolerated. The Galactic Council has decreed Earth and its colonies will be severed from all interstellar ties. You are now beyond our reach, and we will no longer offer you protection. You are to remain isolated. The galaxy will not acknowledge your existence. The silence that followed was deafening. In every corner of the planet, millions sat in stunned disbelief. Governments that had once been aligned with the Galactic Council found themselves isolated. Economies built on galactic trade ground to a halt. Humanity had never been alone in the universe. Now, they were cast adrift, left to fend for themselves. But within this crushing moment of despair, something began to stir. In the wake of the Council's harsh decree, many expected humanity to crumble. Some thought the weight of their expulsion would break them. But they underestimated the one thing the Council had failed to account for, the human spirit. Admiral Cal Drayton, a former military leader now turned secret rebel, felt the stirring of something deeper within himself as the news spread. The exiled military officer had long known that humanity had been marginalized, ignored, and underestimated by the greater galactic powers. It wasn't just the Council's decision to banish them. It was their arrogance, their belief that humanity would be nothing without their support. It was the same arrogance that had led to Earth's mistreatment for centuries. Cal's first reaction was to gather the most trusted members of his old fleet. In the hidden depths of Earth's most remote military bases, a new resistance began to form. Their goal was not just survival, but vengeance. The Council may have seen them as weak, but humanity had one trait no alien species could match: an unyielding will to rise above adversity. The resistance was small, at first. It consisted of a handful of seasoned veterans, scientists, and engineers, each handpicked by Cal. But they shared one singular, burning desire: to show the galaxy that humanity was more than a primitive species to be discarded. They would prove that, despite being cast out, humanity could stand on its own, and even thrive. Their first mission was risky, but it had to be done. Intelligence from disgruntled members of the Council revealed a critical weakness in the galactic defense systems, a vulnerability in the very communications that had kept Earth isolated. If they could infiltrate this system and steal valuable alien technology, they could level the playing field. Drayton gathered his crew, a group that included engineers capable of reverse engineering alien tech and ex-soldiers whose loyalty was unwavering. Using stealth and a mix of newly designed human spacecraft, they launched a covert operation targeting one of the Council's lesser-known supply depots on the edge of Council space. The mission was to retrieve critical data and technology that would allow humanity to defend itself, as well as to send a clear message to the galaxy. The operation was precise, and though tensions were high, the humans pulled off the impossible. They breached the fortified supply station, overpowered the alien guards, and captured valuable resources without a single casualty. The raid wasn't just a success. It was a statement. Humanity was no longer helpless. They had the drive, the cunning, and the ingenuity to strike back. As Drayton stood at the head of the operation, watching the extracted technology begin to take shape, he knew this was just the beginning. They had made their first move, but the true war for humanity's survival was only beginning. And they wouldn't stop until every alien in the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity would not be forgotten. The success of their first operation sent shockwaves through the resistance. What had seemed impossible, breaking into a fortified Council depot, stealing alien technology, and escaping undetected, was now a symbol of what humanity could achieve. Word of the raid spread quickly, both within the resistance ranks and among the general population. People who had once believed their banishment to be a death sentence now saw a flicker of hope. Humanity wasn't done. They weren't powerless. Admiral Cal Drayton, now the de facto leader of the rebellion, knew the importance of momentum. The success of their first mission had proven that humanity could fight back against the alien overlords, but it was a fragile victory. The Council wouldn't sit idly by while humanity gained strength. They would come for Earth and its allies with even greater force. In the hidden depths of an abandoned military complex, Kale convened with his closest allies. Among them was General Lena Vargas, a tactical genius who had been sidelined after the Council's decision to exile Earth. Her cold, calculating mind was vital for the Resistance's next move. Together, they devised a strategy to strike at a Council trade vessel, a massive freighter that regularly passed through a trade route on the fringes of Council space. The freighter was transporting valuable supplies to alien colonies loyal to the Council. If they could intercept it and cripple its operations, it would send a clear message that humanity was not to be trifled with. The mission was ambitious. The Council would undoubtedly have reinforcements nearby, but the humans had something the Council didn't anticipate: their resourcefulness. Using the stolen technology from the raid, Cal's fleet had been modified into sleek, efficient warships, and the crew had undergone months of grueling training to ensure their skills were honed to perfection. Every crew member understood the stakes. It wasn't just about the mission. It was about survival. The night of the raid, the fleet moved with a deadly precision. The operation was carried out under the cover of a starless sky, deep in the cold reaches of space. As the human ships neared the Council freighter, the tension was palpable. There was no turning back. The first strike came from a surprise attack, the humans deploying EMP devices to disable the freighter's shields and communication systems. The Council crew aboard the freighter scrambled, but the humans were already inside. They moved swiftly through the corridors of the freighter, overwhelming the stunned alien guards with efficient, brutal force. The freighter's systems were now in their hands. But just as victory seemed within their grasp, an unexpected response came from the Council. A fleet of fighter ships, far larger than the Resistance had anticipated, arrived on the scene. The human fleet found itself surrounded, with no way to escape. In a moment of pure desperation, Kale made the bold decision to initiate a risky maneuver, a series of precision strikes targeting the freighter's power core, causing a chain reaction that would obliterate both the ship and its attackers. It was a one-way ticket for the fleet, but it would send a clear message to the galaxy. The humans were not afraid to sacrifice everything for their freedom. The resulting explosion lit up the dark void of space. The human fleet, battered and nearly decimated, managed to escape, but they had crippled the Council's trade routes and taken a key victory. The mission was a success, but it came at a high cost. The human fleet was scattered, many ships were lost, and the crews were badly shaken. As the remnants of the fleet returned to their hidden base, Cal's heart was heavy with the weight of their losses. Yet, as he surveyed the survivors, a sense of determination rose within him. They had proven they could strike back. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The rebellion had only just begun, and the Council would soon learn that exile was the worst mistake they could have made. The first victory had been won, but the war was far from over. The explosion of the Council freighter reverberated across the galaxy. It was more than just a tactical victory. It was a declaration of war. Humanity, exiled and abandoned by the Galactic Council, had struck back with a ferocity that sent ripples of concern through the alien powers. But their victory was short-lived. The Council was not one to be humiliated, especially by a species it had cast aside as inconsequential. In the wake of the raid, the Council made its move. A massive fleet was dispatched to Earth, the heart of humanity's rebellion. It was an invasion force unlike any the human resistance had faced before. The Council had gathered its most formidable armada, a coalition of powerful alien races who had long maintained an uneasy peace under their rule. These forces had one goal: to crush the upstart humans once and for all, to ensure their defiance was stamped out, and that no other species dared to rise against the Council. The humans were aware of the impending attack, and preparations were made in haste. With their limited resources and a fleet still recovering from the last mission, the resistance leaders understood that Earth itself was vulnerable. The planet, once the cradle of humanity, was now a target. Admiral Drayton and General Vargas knew that they had only one chance to defend their homeworld, and it would be a battle that would determine humanity's fate. The fleet stationed near Earth had been reinforced with every available ship. Drayton's fleet, though small in comparison, was made up of ships built using the stolen alien technology and the courage of human ingenuity. The battle would be their test, their defining moment. It was no longer just about surviving. They would fight for their home, for their future. As the Council's fleet appeared on the outer edge of Earth's system, Drayton made the difficult decision to meet them head-on. The initial clash was catastrophic. The sheer size and firepower of the enemy fleet overwhelmed humanity's forces. Alien ships tore through the human lines, and Earth's defenses, though impressive for a newly formed fleet, were insufficient to counter the Council's might. Yet, humanity was not known for backing down, even as the tide of battle seemed to turn against them. Drayton's strategy became clear. If they could break the enemy's command ship, they might cripple the entire invasion. A group of elite human ships, piloted by the best of the best, launched a daring assault on the Council's flagship, the Vashtor. The ship was a leviathan of advanced alien design, heavily shielded and brimming with weapons capable of annihilating entire cities. But the human fleet had learned to fight in ways the Council had not anticipated. Admiral Drayton himself piloted a stealth craft, his ship cloaked in a bubble of interference. His team would slip through the Council's lines, cutting their way toward the heart of the enemy fleet. The human ships, smaller and faster, used hit-and-run tactics to take down critical support vessels, cutting off supplies to the larger warships. The battle raged for hours, both sides relentless in their struggle. In the final moments, Drayton's team broke through to the flagship. It was a desperate, close-quarters fight. The human ships used every trick, every advantage of their stolen alien technology, to strike fast and hard. The Vashtor's defenses began to buckle under the relentless assault. Then came the turning point. A critical strike from Drayton's ship hit the flagship's main power core, sending a massive shockwave through the enemy fleet. In a spectacular explosion, the Vashtor was obliterated, and with it, the heart of the invasion force. The remaining alien ships, disorganized and without leadership, were forced to retreat. The battle was over. Earth had been saved, at least for now, but at a staggering cost. The human fleet had suffered heavy losses, and the planet had endured significant damage from the bombardment. Thousands of civilians had perished in the crossfire, and the emotional toll was immense. Yet, as the smoke cleared, Drayton stood on the bridge of his flagship, gazing out at the wreckage of the enemy fleet. Humanity had done the impossible. They had fought back the might of the Galactic Council and secured Earth's survival, but the victory had come with a price. The Council had not been completely defeated, and its next move would surely be more brutal. Drayton knew this war was far from over, but as he looked out over the stars, he also knew something else. Humanity had proven it could fight, and they would not stop until they had taken their rightful place among the stars. The battle for Earth's survival had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, but the victory came at a heavy price. While humanity had successfully repelled the invasion, they knew the Council would not take defeat lightly. It was only a matter of time before retaliation came. However, the Galactic Council had underestimated something crucial: the determination of humanity and the speed with which they adapted to their new reality. While Cal Drayton and General Vargas regrouped, the resistance focused not just on rebuilding their fleet and military capabilities, but also on shifting the narrative. The Council, in an effort to maintain control over its fractured territories, launched a massive propaganda campaign, depicting humanity as a dangerous and uncivilized species that posed a threat to galactic peace. They painted humanity as anarchic, barbaric, and too aggressive to be trusted with the vast knowledge and power that the galaxy held. Across every holo-network and communication channel, the Council broadcasted its message. The humans, the Council's spokesbeings announced, have shown their true nature. They are a plague upon the galaxy, a primitive species who cannot be allowed to rise above their own limitations. The message echoed in every corner of Council space, and soon it became impossible to ignore. Humanity's reputation was in tatters, and there was a growing movement in the galaxy to bring them to heel. But Drayton and the rebel leadership understood that they could not match the Council's influence head-on in terms of raw propaganda power. Instead, they turned the very narrative the Council was trying to use against them. Humanity would no longer be the oppressed. They would become the liberators. They started broadcasting their own messages, showing humanity's victories, the diverse allies who fought alongside them, and the promise of a new galaxy, one where all species had a voice. At the heart of this new campaign was a charismatic figure, Lena Vargas. Known for her brilliant military strategies, Vargas became the face of the resistance, speaking directly to the oppressed species of the galaxy. "We are not the monsters the Council paints us to be," she told the galaxy in a stirring transmission. "We are the survivors. We are the ones who will stand against oppression, no matter the cost." Slowly, the tide began to turn. Rebel factions across the galaxy, alien races long subjugated by the Council, started to send messages of solidarity. It wasn't just humans fighting the Council now. It was an entire rebellion, made up of diverse species who were tired of being ruled by a few, tired of being under the thumb of an empire that viewed them as tools to be used and discarded. But just as it seemed humanity's propaganda war was gaining traction, a new, even more dangerous threat emerged. A faction within the Council, one that had been operating in the shadows, revealed itself. They were led by Ezrak, an alien who had once been a high-ranking officer in the Council's military. Known for his cold, calculating demeanor, Ezrak's faction had long been planning a counterattack, one that would involve more than just military force. Ezrak's vision was a ruthless one: to crush the rebellion not by defeating them in battle, but by breaking their spirit. Ezrak was a master of psychological warfare, and he understood that it wasn't enough to destroy the human fleet or wipe out their bases. He aimed to turn humanity's allies against them, to destabilize the fragile alliances that had begun to form. He also targeted the civilians who had rallied behind the human cause, planning to demoralize them through calculated strikes against their homes and cities. The first of Ezrak's attacks came swiftly, taking humanity by surprise. He used advanced weaponry, capable of targeting civilian infrastructure with pinpoint precision. Entire cities that had been vital to the rebellion were reduced to ruins. Refugees fleeing the Council's attacks were slaughtered by the thousands, and their families were left homeless and broken. Ezrak's methods were cold and efficient, and his attacks sent a chilling message. Humanity might have won the battle for Earth, but they would pay for it dearly. This new enemy's appearance shattered the fragile sense of security humanity had begun to build. Ezrak's tactics were as brutal as they were effective, and the rebellion found itself struggling to maintain control of its rapidly growing territories. Despite the unity they had inspired among their allies, the humans now faced an adversary who was not just powerful, but also patient and calculating. Ezrak's rise marked a turning point. While humanity had gained significant ground, they now had to confront an enemy who would stop at nothing to destroy them. Not with armies alone, but with tactics that cut to the very heart of their cause. The fight for the future of the galaxy was about to become far more complex, and Drayton knew that humanity's true test had only just begun. As the rebellion's influence spread, the galaxy seemed to be on the brink of a major shift. Humanity's victory over the Council's invasion fleet had inspired countless oppressed species to join the cause, but Ezrak's faction had cast a long shadow over their triumph. His calculated psychological warfare turned the tables on humanity, weakening the fragile alliances they had forged. The human fleet was scattered, morale was faltering, and many of their new allies began to question if the rebellion was truly capable of securing a lasting peace. Azrak had played the perfect game of deception. Under the guise of peace negotiations, he began sowing discord among the very races that had once joined humanity's cause. He knew that without unity, the rebellion would fracture and his chances of success would grow. He cleverly manipulated dissent, sending agents to infiltrate the highest ranks of the rebellion and plant seeds of doubt. One of the first major blows to humanity's resolve came from within. Drayton's trusted lieutenant, Captain Naomi Kor, a brilliant tactician who had been with him from the beginning, became disillusioned. Azrak's spies had worked their poison into her thoughts, preying on her fear and uncertainty. She was convinced that humanity, with its rebellious nature and chaotic methods, would never be able to create the lasting peace they promised. The constant war, the sacrifices, was it all worth it? Was the galaxy doomed to endless conflict because of their arrogance? Kor's doubts began to manifest in subtle ways. She began to question Drayton's leadership, suggesting more extreme measures, actions that could alienate their allies. She pushed for strikes against civilian targets that would bring immediate results, but only lead to greater suffering. Her belief in the need for unyielding control over the rebellion had begun to blind her to the bigger picture. Drayton, always a man of principle and compassion, refused to follow her counsel. He knew the rebellion could not become a mirror of the tyranny they fought against. He understood that the galaxy needed hope, not terror. This difference in ideology drove a wedge between them. One fateful day, after a heated argument, Captain Kor disappeared. The rebellion's command was thrown into disarray. Drayton suspected that Kor had defected to Azrak's side, but he couldn't be sure. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed Kor had been captured by the Council. Others whispered that she was collaborating with the enemy, providing Azrak with vital intelligence. The truth was far more sinister. Kor had, in fact, fallen victim to Azrak's manipulation, and her betrayal would serve as a devastating blow to the fragile unity the rebellion had so painstakingly built. As the rebellion's leadership struggled to cope with this internal crisis, Drayton doubled down on his efforts to protect Earth and their allies. However, the revelations of Kor's possible betrayal caused irreparable fractures in the rebellion. The Council and Azrak, sensing an opportunity, struck with surgical precision. A massive coordinated assault was launched on Earth's outer colonies. Azrak's forces used Kor's inside information to disable key defenses, allowing the Council's warships to penetrate deeply into human space. The human colonies, once protected under the banner of rebellion, were left vulnerable. Entire populations were slaughtered or enslaved. The once vibrant worlds that had rallied to humanity's cause fell into chaos. News of the devastation reached Drayton and his allies with brutal speed. He stood before the remnants of his fleet, his face a mask of determination and regret. He had failed to protect them. Kor's betrayal and Azrak's unyielding pursuit of their destruction had cost the rebellion more than just military strength. It had cost them their hope. But even in the darkest hour, humanity's resilience refused to be extinguished. As the loss of their colonies began to settle in, Drayton made the fateful decision to launch a counteroffensive against Azrak's forces. With the remnants of his fleet, he prepared to strike directly at Azrak's stronghold, a massive fortress located in the heart of Council space. It would be a suicide mission, a desperate bid to break Azrak's grip on the rebellion and end the war. Drayton knew the cost. His fleet was decimated, their resources drained. But he understood one thing clearly: to win the war, to stop the cycle of destruction Azrak had unleashed, humanity would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. The rebellion was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the soul of the galaxy. The next few days were tense as Drayton and his team prepared for the assault on Azrak's fortress. Even with the loss of so many, humanity's will to fight had not been broken. If anything, the trials they had endured had only strengthened their resolve. They would not let Azrak's treachery be the final word in their story. The galaxy would learn that humanity, no matter the odds, would always rise again. With the countdown ticking toward what would likely be the final battle, Drayton stood at the helm of his flagship, staring into the abyss of space. A new chapter in the war for the galaxy was about to begin, and he knew that this fight would determine whether humanity would remain a beacon of hope or be lost forever in the shadows of betrayal. The rebellion had never faced a more dire situation than the one before them now. With the fall of Earth's outer colonies and the betrayal of Captain Naomi Corps, the remnants of humanity's forces gathered in what was perhaps their final stand. Admiral Cal Drayton had made the decision to launch a direct assault on Azrak's stronghold, a heavily fortified fortress at the heart of Council space, known as Rathar Prime. It was a fortress that was virtually impenetrable, surrounded by layers of defense, both physical and electronic. But it was also a symbol, the Council's command center, the nexus of their power, and the source of Azrak's ruthless control over the galaxy. Destroying it could end the war or seal humanity's doom. For Drayton, this was no longer a fight for survival. It was a battle to ensure that humanity's ideals of freedom, unity, and hope would not be extinguished. His fleet was barely a shadow of what it had once been. The ships were damaged, the crew exhausted, and morale was low. But there was a fire in their hearts, a resolve that had been hardened through endless suffering. This mission would be their final gambit. As the human fleet approached Rathar Prime, the silence of space seemed to press down on them. The fortress was surrounded by a swarm of Council warships, and advanced defense systems littered the space around it. It was a fortress that had never been breached by any force, human or alien, and its defenses were designed to crush any hope of success. Azrak's forces were prepared, expecting a direct assault, but they had underestimated humanity's ingenuity once again. Drayton's plan was both audacious and fraught with peril. Using stolen technology from the earlier raids, his fleet had been equipped with stealth cloaking systems and advanced hacking tools, allowing them to bypass some of the fortress's outer defenses. The fleet's remaining ships split into two groups. One would feint a direct assault on the outer defenses, drawing Azrak's attention and forces away from the real target. The second group, a small task force led by Drayton, would infiltrate the fortress directly, aiming for its core. As the human fleet engaged the enemy in a feigned assault, intense skirmishes erupted in the void of space. The Council's warships began to deploy in response, and soon, a chaotic battle unfolded. The humans fought valiantly, using their knowledge of alien tactics and their superior adaptability to counter the overwhelming force of Azrak's fleet. But the real danger lay within the heart of the fortress. Drayton's task force moved silently through the shadows of space, cloaked and unseen, slipping past the heavy defenses around Rathar Prime. They breached the first layer of the fortress's shields and then navigated their way through a labyrinth of corridors and tunnels. As they infiltrated the fortress's inner sanctum, Drayton could feel the weight of their mission on his shoulders. If they failed, humanity's last hope would be gone. Inside the fortress, they encountered fierce resistance. Azrak's elite soldiers were ready for them, armed with advanced weaponry and fortified positions. A deadly firefight erupted in the narrow hallways, and the sound of weapons echoed through the empty corridors. Drayton and his team pushed forward relentlessly, determined to reach the control room, where Azrak himself was likely overseeing the battle. The deeper they went, the more they realized that Azrak had anticipated their every move. It was a trap, a final play to crush humanity's resistance for good. The team was ambushed by a new generation of Council war machines, specifically designed to eliminate human forces. The tide of battle seemed to turn against them. Casualties mounted, and the team began to question if they could make it to their objective in time. But just as all seemed lost, an unexpected ally emerged from the shadows. Captain Naomi Corps, once thought to have defected to Azrak's side, appeared before them. She was not the traitor the rebellion had believed her to be. Instead, she had been working covertly to undermine Azrak's hold over the fortress from within. She had gained his trust and had been planting misinformation and sabotaging his operations for months. The time had come for her to fulfill her true role in humanity's fight for survival. With Kor's knowledge of the fortress's layout and her insider access, the team was able to bypass the final defenses and reach the control room. There, they confronted Azrak, who stood waiting, a cold smile on his face. "I knew you would come," Azrak said, his voice low and calculating. "You think you can destroy this fortress, end this war, but you're wrong. You'll die here, and with your death, the rebellion will crumble. Your kind will never understand the true nature of power." But Drayton, his face grim and resolute, responded, "You've underestimated humanity for the last time, Azrak. We don't fight for power. We fight for freedom." In the final moments, as the team fought to disable the fortress's power core, the true nature of Azrak's weakness was revealed. He was not invincible. His arrogance had blinded him. The fortress began to collapse around them, and Azrak's forces, now leaderless, faltered. In the end, it wasn't Drayton or Kor who defeated Azrak, but the collective spirit of humanity, the belief that they could overcome anything, no matter how overwhelming the odds. As Rathar Prime was torn apart, its core erupting in a massive explosion, the rebellion's final victory was sealed. Azrak's reign was over, and with it, the Council's grip on the galaxy began to weaken. The war was far from over, but humanity had taken the first critical step toward reclaiming its place in the stars. And as the remnants of the rebellion regrouped, one thing was certain: humanity would not fall. Not while they still had hope, and not while they still had each other. The explosion of Rathar Prime reverberated throughout the galaxy, a cataclysmic event that signaled the end of Azrak's rule. His forces, leaderless and disorganized, quickly fell into chaos, with the remaining Council fleets retreating to regroup. The fortress, the symbol of the Council's power, was no more, and with its destruction, the tides of war began to shift in humanity's favor. The rebellion had struck a decisive blow, and the galaxy's status quo was irreparably altered. But the victory came with its own burdens. As humanity's forces celebrated their triumph, Drayton stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the wreckage of Azrak's fortress. The cost of the victory had been heavy. Countless lives had been lost, including some of his closest comrades. The rebellion was now scattered across the galaxy, its forces depleted and struggling to maintain cohesion. The destruction of Rathar Prime had thrown the Council into disarray, but the galaxy was not without its fractures. The sudden power vacuum left behind by Azrak's death unleashed an unpredictable wave of conflict. Various factions, some loyal to the Council, others power-hungry warlords, vied for control, eager to seize power in the absence of the Council's central authority. The galaxy, though weakened, had not been tamed. It was a landscape of shifting alliances and betrayals, and in this chaotic new world, humanity had to quickly decide where it stood. Drayton knew that the rebellion's work was far from over. The destruction of the fortress was not the end of the war. It was merely a shift in its trajectory. Humanity had become a symbol of resistance, but they now had to face the consequences of their newfound prominence. The galaxy was in flux, and with their victory, humanity had inherited a broken empire, one that was ripe for exploitation by those who sought to seize its power. In the aftermath of the battle, General Vargas, now a key figure in the rebellion, convened a council of the galaxy's remaining rebel leaders. They gathered in secret on a hidden world far from the reach of the remaining Council loyalists. Their meeting was tense, for while they had all fought for freedom, their ideologies were often at odds. Some believed in an all-out war to eliminate the remnants of the Council and establish a new order. Others sought a more diplomatic route, hoping to heal the galaxy's wounds through negotiations. But despite their differences, they knew they needed unity if they were to avoid descending into civil war themselves. "We must stand together," Vargas spoke, her voice strong but weary. "We've defeated Azrak, but the true challenge begins now. The Council's loyalists are scattered, but they're still dangerous. There are factions who will never accept humanity's rise. We must show them that we are not just a new power, but a force for change, one that can bring order to this chaos. The rebellion's leaders nodded in agreement, but the reality was that not all were willing to accept humanity's leadership. Many species, long oppressed by the Council, viewed humanity's rise with suspicion. Some were still hesitant to place their faith in a species they had once seen as inferior. Humanity had proven its strength, but there was still much to be done to prove their worth as the galaxy's new leaders. Meanwhile, on Earth, the scars of the war ran deep. The planet had been battered, its resources stretched thin, and its cities were still recovering from the Council's retaliatory strikes. The human population had suffered immensely, but they were resilient. With the rebellion's victories, hope began to rekindle. The rebuilding effort began in earnest, and new leadership emerged within Earth's government. People from all walks of life rallied together, determined to build a future worthy of the sacrifices made. Yet, even as humanity took steps toward rebuilding, new threats loomed on the horizon. The remnants of the Council, now scattered but not broken, began to regroup under new leadership. They had lost their fortress, but they had not lost their power. Their hold over certain sectors of the galaxy was unshaken, and many of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful races remained loyal to the idea of galactic unity under the Council. A new council was beginning to form, a coalition of races that, though weakened, still had the resources and influence to challenge humanity's rise. Drayton knew that the coming months would be critical. Humanity's allies, though loyal, would not follow blindly. They needed proof that humanity could lead, not just fight. And as the remnants of the old order began to rally under a new banner, Drayton prepared for the inevitable, the Second War, one that would determine the fate of the galaxy. For now, the rebellion's victory was a glimmer of hope in a galaxy that had long been trapped in cycles of oppression and war. But the cost of that victory was high, and humanity's future hung in the balance. The galaxy was fractured, and while there were those who believed in the promise of a new order, there were also those who feared what humanity's rise meant for the old ways. The question that remained was simple. Could humanity rise above the ashes of the past, or would they fall victim to the same cycles of power, betrayal, and violence that had shaped the galaxy for millennia? The answer would come in time, as the true battle for the future of the galaxy was only just beginning. The galaxy, now in the throes of transition, held its breath as humanity stepped into the void left behind by the Council's collapse. Drayton stood before a council of military and civilian leaders on Earth, the heart of humanity's newfound rebellion-turned-empire. The victory over Azrak had emboldened them, but it had also thrust them into a leadership role that few had been prepared for. As the former rebel fighters began to shape the future of humanity, the galaxy watched, unsure whether the humans who had once been banished would become the rulers of a new age or the harbingers of chaos. Drayton's vision for humanity was clear. They would build an empire, but one founded on principles of justice, equality, and freedom for all. It was a bold idea in a galaxy accustomed to long-standing hierarchies and rigid power structures. Humanity's greatest challenge now lay not in defeating their enemies, but in proving they could lead a diverse galaxy, fractured by centuries of conflict and oppression, into a future of stability and peace. The rebellion's leaders knew they could not do it alone. Humanity would need to form alliances with the very races they had once fought alongside, creating a new order from the ashes of the old. But trust was fragile, and many alien species still harbored doubts. For them, humanity was an unknown, and the scars of the past ran deep. How could the galaxy be certain that humanity, once banished for their aggressive nature, would not turn on their allies once they had the power? As Drayton toured the galaxy, meeting with former allies, some greeted him with hope, while others viewed him with skepticism. Among the most hesitant were the Vora, a race of highly intelligent, pacifist beings who had suffered under the Council's rule for centuries. While their loyalty to the rebellion had been invaluable, their leaders questioned whether humanity could rise above its roots in war and violence. Could humanity truly provide the peace they promised, or would they fall prey to the same thirst for domination that had defined so many empires before them? Lena Vargas, now humanity's ambassador to the galaxy, worked tirelessly to bring together the fractured factions. She negotiated with alien leaders, speaking not just of military victories, but of rebuilding, of a shared future in which all races would have a seat at the table. She held the difficult position of balancing humanity's ambitions with the fears and desires of their new allies. Every meeting, every negotiation, felt like a delicate dance. One false step, and the fragile alliances could crumble. But not all factions in the galaxy were willing to see humanity succeed. As humanity's influence grew, so did the opposition. A coalition of former Council loyalists, disgruntled warlords, and isolationist factions formed under the banner of the Old Dominion, determined to restore the galaxy to its previous order. Led by a charismatic yet ruthless figure named Torma Vex, a former high-ranking council officer, the Old Dominion sought to reclaim their former territories and remove humanity from the power structures they had so swiftly infiltrated. Torma Vex's forces, although fractured and scattered, were powerful, and they controlled vast stretches of the galaxy's trade routes and resources. Vex had rallied numerous races who feared humanity's rise, warning them that a galaxy ruled by humans would be nothing short of tyranny. "They've already taken Earth," he told his followers, "and now they want to take the stars. We cannot allow that." With tensions escalating, the galaxy teetered on the brink of a new war. Humanity found itself in an impossible position. They were caught between forging a new future and defending their right to exist in it. To many, the conflict was not just a fight for territory. It was a battle for the very soul of the galaxy. Drayton, now fully aware that humanity's future was anything but certain, called for a galactic summit, a final decisive negotiation between the factions. He knew that if there was to be peace, the galaxy would need to find a way to coexist. The stakes could not have been higher. One final chance to avert full-scale war, or risk plunging the galaxy back into an age of endless conflict. As the summit began, Drayton addressed the assembled leaders of various factions, his voice steady, but filled with the weight of the moment. "We are here today not to demand control, but to offer a choice for a future where all of us, regardless of our race, our history, or our differences, can live in peace. We cannot undo the past, but we can build something better. If we do not choose this path, we'd risk plunging the galaxy into an even darker age, one where only the strongest will survive. And that is a future I will not see humanity a part of." The room was filled with silence as the leaders considered his words. Torma Vex, who had not been moved by Drayton's plea, stood with a defiant look, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. The galaxy had been burned by the Council's greed and corruption for centuries. Could humanity's promises be enough to heal that wound? The decision hung in the air like a storm, and the galaxy waited, wondering if this new empire forged by humanity's will would be the dawn of a new era, or if the flame of hope would be snuffed out by the darkness of the past. What the galaxy needed was not just a new empire, but a new vision for the future. And whether humanity could provide that vision, or fall into the same traps as their predecessors, was a question yet to be answered. The galaxy was on the cusp of a new dawn, but that dawn would be shaped by the choices made in this critical moment.